Sandcastle Games debuted in 2019 with Tom Lehman's Res Arcana, which has been hugely successful, has had 2 expansions released to date, and Sandcastle Games now in 2022 finally has its 2nd standalone title on the market, Eric B. Vogel's First Empires. A game for 2 to 5 players in which you are leading a civilization, although not necessarily one from our timeline, because we're in an alternate Earth of sorts where things have developed differently over time and the world is laid out a bit differently in terms of who is existing where, and you're going to try your hand leading one of these First Empires. Here's the setup for a 5-player game of First Empires, with each player taking one of the 5 civilizations and the matching civilization board, choosing at random or as you wish, depending on where you want to start on the board and what starting difference you might want to have, because everyone has a slightly different set of numbers to begin the game with. You also have slight differences in the left and right columns, which show the values you're going to have for a particular thing and the points you will score at game's end. Each player starts in a designated location. You're going to have 3 or 4 people, depending on which civilization you are. You have one of your 6 cities at random placed in the starting location. The other 5 are at the top of your columns. They are valued 1 to 3 points. You do not look at them until the end of the game. Each player has a deck of 9 cards, and you will start with 1 card, or if you are the yellow player, 2 cards, and they give you a special scoring condition. If you meet that during a turn, you can play that card and score the points on it. You can also use the cards in other ways as well. When you are set to begin, the first player is going to roll as many dice as the number shown next to their orange cube. You've got dice, cube, 2. So if I'm the first player, I roll 2 dice. I have 1 re-roll. So perhaps I want to keep the orange and I'll re-roll this one. Perfect. Now I have 3 movement points. When you move to go from one area to an adjacent one, that's 1 movement. To go across water, well, going into water is 1 movement on its own. Going here is a 2nd movement. You cannot stop movement in the ocean because you die. We are not amphibious. You have a dividing line here for the hemispheres. So there's 1 hemisphere, another hemisphere. You can get anywhere on the board with 3 movement points. So I could go 1, 2, 3, because this is all adjacent to this 1 water. But I'll go to orange with 1. I'll go 1, 2 to Australia for 2. And I've used 3 movement and I'm done. You don't have to use all your movement, but you may choose to. Why are you going particular places? Well, you might have something on your card that you are trying to meet, some condition, but primarily you are driven by the dice that you roll. So at the end of your movement, you're going to look and see, do you occupy regions that match the colors that you rolled? I am in an orange region, I'm in a green region, so I get to advance orange and advance green. And what this means is, on my next turn, I'm going to roll 3 dice instead of 2, and when I advance in green, I draw a card. Each +1 there means I draw a card, so sometimes I draw one very quickly. Other players might draw them a bit differently. This player starts with 2, so they draw less frequently. Additionally, I'm going to score points at the end of the game. You want to advance as high up in as many columns as you can in order to score points. I draw a card. I still have 3 people on the board. My turn is over. Let's say purple player goes now. I'm not going to set up every single board. I'll just lay out the purple board here. They roll 3 dice. They have only 2 movement though. 2 movement. So they can't, let's see. We'll keep that. We'll re-roll once. And they get this. Okay. They cannot reach an orange and a yellow and a blue because they have only 2 movements available to them. They can go 1, 2 to get to blue, or 1, 2 to get to orange, because these 3 locations across the hemisphere lines. They're generally very valuable because you can get anywhere from here into movement. You go into either of the waters and then you're there. But I can't do all of this. I can't get everything. Moving up in orange does not give me any bonus. I'm already rolling 3 dice, so maybe that's not important. Maybe I instead want to go up in yellow, because when I go up in yellow, I'll have 5 people on the board. And maybe I want to go up in purple because then I'll have more movements, but I didn't roll purple on the dice. Now, on your turn, after you have rolled and re-rolled and done your movement, you can choose if you want to discard a card in your hand to change a die to the color of your choice. So purple starts with 1 card. They could choose to give up that card. It's worth 2 to 6 points if they fulfill it, but of course, they can't fulfill it unless they start doing things. Sometimes it is more advantageous to throw a card away to do something on the board. In particular, I will throw this card away. I will change this die to purple. So you can change it to the color of your choice. I'm in yellow and purple. It doesn't matter that I have 2 people here. I have 1 purple die and 1 purple region. If I had 2 purple dice, I need to be in 2 purple regions. This does not count. I can't put both dice here. So I advance in purple, which means I'm going to have 3 movement next time instead of 2. I advance in yellow, which means I put 2 more people on the board. And when you add people, you can add them as you wish to whatever locations you are already in. If we go now to the green player, kind of going clockwise around the board here, they roll 2 dice. They have 2 re-rolls. Well, I know I might want to keep green, purple. I can get to purple. Sure, let's just do that. 1, 2, I move up to purple. Maybe I want to go here. Doesn't really make a difference. Or actually, 1, 2, let me go into Europe. Although, this yellow person might want to kick me out. Let me just do that, just so I can show you how combat works in this game. So I advance green and purple. I'm going to have more movement. I will draw a card. I'll have 2 cards in my hand. Of course, I'm getting points for those. Let's go to yellow. Okay, yellow's going to start with 2 cards. They have 2 dice. Green and blue. Wow, that is not great. So let's say they use a reroll. And yellow and orange. So yellow could just go here and here and advance yellow and orange. Let's say instead they did purple. Just so I can give a combat example here. They could go over here into purple. They could go here in the purple. That would probably make more sense than doing combat, but I really want to show you combat. So you can go into a region where someone else is located as long as you have more people than them when you move in. So I have 2 movement points. I can move these 2 together into this area, and green is defeated. There's no randomness to it. You just have to outnumber whoever is in that land, and they have to retreat. They go elsewhere. You cannot attack a player's last land, but green can retreat to this area. They retreat to anywhere where they already have a presence. They only have 1 presence, so they have to go here. If green had expanded and was here and here, I can retreat to either location. My choice. So you have some flexibility on where you retreat to. If you were retreating multiple people, they all have to go to 1 location. In this case, I would have to go here. Now, the dice also have, in addition to the 5 colors that match the lands, that match the player counts, that match the cubes on the board, there is a sword. Okay, we haven't seen any swords yet in the multiple rolls that we've had. If you have a sword, that counts as another person. So I could go in here with 1 person and 1 sword, and that counts as 2 people outnumbering this one, and the green player has to retreat. That means I spent only 1 movement. I have another movement to do something else with, and I don't know what I want to do because I have only yellow. I'm definitely going to get yellow, Maybe I want to go here. Maybe I just want to hang out here and then spend my card to flip this to purple. And then that way I'll advance both yellow and purple. If you do not have a sword, you can choose after you roll and after you re-roll to discard a card from your hand to change a die into a sword. And you can use a sword multiple times. If, for example, we had this type of setup and let's say we had this. The yellow player is going to go. They have 2 movement. With 1 movement, they go in here. They've got a sword with them, so it's as if they were 2 people. The green player has to retreat. They have 1 more movement because they only spent 1. They can now go into here. They outnumber the orange player, and the orange player has to retreat. And now they're in a green location, and they can advance in the green. So swords are quite useful if you are trying to take over land, and you will definitely want to because after the second round of the game or so, most of these areas will be occupied, and if you want to make progress, you need to make room for yourself at the expense of someone else. So, say I went here, we advance on the board. Might as well go to the orange player, rolling 2 dice. They have start with 4 people. I've got 2 movement. Again, I can just go here and here and get orange and yellow, which means I'll roll 3 dice next time and add another person to the board. Okay, the first round is often set up. You're kind of spreading out, going to different locations. The green made a poor choice here by going to this area where they'd probably get kicked out. If they had not done that, maybe they would have gone up here to get a foothold in the Northern Americas, or possibly an island, because that is harder to take over since you must spend a movement to go in the water first. And if you don't have a sword, you're going to need a couple of people coming over, which means you would need 4 movement to come attack that island. Might want to set up ground there. And then we go back to blue and we start the next round. In a 5-player game, you are going to play 7 rounds. In a game with 2 to 4 players, you go 8 rounds. You are going to continue to advance. As you move up columns, if you hit one of these locations that has the dark marker, so say I end up advancing blue twice over a couple turns or what have you, I take the city that's at the top of that column and I have to place it somewhere on the board where I do not have a city. So I could go here, or again, smarter move possibly, go on the island, just because it is harder to take over. That is important because if someone comes and attacks this location, or they come over here and attack this location, orange next, let's say yellow next turn ends up with a sword and something else, and they go 2 movement, 1, 2. They take over this area and they kick me out. They get to conquer this city and keep it. It's worth 1 to 3 points. They don't look at it till game's end, but now they have those points instead of me. I get those points only if I still have this on the board at the end of the game. Cities on the board here do nothing for you. They are worthless because you get them only when you advance in certain elements. If you have not advanced, you are not rewarded. Seems fair. Okay, so you're trying to advance up all the columns to score points. You are trying to collect cities, either by keeping them on the board until game's end or taking them away from other people. You can, if you want, just travel out and leave your city alone. If no one ever goes there, then you will score those points at game's end. But spoiler alert, someone will probably go there and take that because they need the green if nothing else. If I have a choice of going green here or green here, definitely going here. Okay. So points from the columns, points from cities, and points from cards, which I have not shown yet. So possible things that you have. Occupy 2 purple regions. So if during a turn, me as the blue player with this card in my hand, if I occupy 2 purple regions, I can put this down and get 4 points. If I discard this in order to change a die to a color so that I can advance, well, I'm almost scoring 4 points anyway. If I advance here, I'm scoring 3 points. Here is 3 points, and I put 2 more people on the board, which is pretty much as good as 4 points. You want to advance up the columns as quickly as you can, so you might just be throwing things away rather than scoring them, such as this, occupy 3 adjacent regions. It's a nice 2 points if you can get it, but advancing on the board will often get you 2 points wherever you are going, and it will boost the numbers in something else. Capture 2 rival cities in 1 turn. Most people have goals just like these. All right, it might be a different color, occupy 2 orange regions, 2 green regions. Everyone has occupy 2 islands. So islands are good strongholds, but they're desirable in passing just because they can be a stronghold for someone else who scores this in the meantime. Every player also has color-specific cards, such as score 2 other cards in 1 turn. That I have not seen in 7 games that I've played. No one's scored this. No one has scored this either. Use 4 rerolls in 1 turn because you have to advance all the way up here at a minimum and then actually reroll 4 times. When you reroll, you can reroll as many or as few dice as you wish. But you have to do this. This was my first card in my very first game when I was the Blue Civilization, and I threw it away immediately because I could see that I would need many, many turns before I could possibly score that. Have at least 2 cities on the board at the same time. Sure, that's generally doable. Raise your orange track by 2 in 1 turn, which means I would need to be in 2 orange locations and have 2 orange dice. It's not easy, but it is possible. And everyone has something like this. You can watch out. It gives you some clue as to where people might be going. But you're only going to see at most 7 of these 9 cards as you advance up the green column. So you can't be guaranteed of drawing something. It's going to be a chance element, but it can give you points along with the cities and the columns. And after a certain number of rounds, whoever has the most points wins. As I mentioned, I played First Empire 7 times. That's on a review copy from Sandcastle Games with all player counts 2, 3, 4, and 5. The 2-player game works a bit differently because you're not playing on this side of the board, but the alternate one, where you just have Eurasia. You have only yellow and orange. Those are the only 2 colors you can use. I assume the civilizations have been designed specifically so they work with 2 and then 3, 4, 5 as you add people on the board with slight differences to how they're set up. This plays much differently primarily because you have only 2 areas of each color, which makes the cards a lot harder to achieve. It is hard to go up on a color specifically because you get spread out in an area and you have to push that other person out of the way. If you were trying to get in 2 purple regions, there's only 2. If you were trying to score the card that says claim 2 islands, there's only 2. So you have many fewer options as to where to go when you were playing the 2-player game. It's a bit more straightforward because you know the other player is going to come at you. It's not quite that way with 3 to 5 players, primarily because Eric Vogel has specifically tried to design a game, a confrontational game in which you are trying to take over other people's land that does not reward turtling. That is, you get no benefit from sitting in your space and just doing nothing while other people fight it out and there's attrition and they all lose forces and you just gain benefit from sitting there. Which, of course, if you played Risk back in the old days where everyone just wants to occupy Australia and hole up there and just collect troops as a bonus for the continent turn after turn, right? That's where you think, what you think of immediately, at least I do, when you think of turtling. That is not something that's going to win you the game in First Empires because you gain points by scoring cards. You can do that only if you are going out and doing stuff. You gain points from cities, which you are only going to get when you take over a territory or when you advance up tracks and put cities on the board. And third, you gain points only by advancing up tracks, which means you have to go out and take over land to advance. Whether it's occupied or not, you need to take it over. It's not personal. I'm just kicking you out because I need blue. Sorry. Sometimes it is a little personal, but usually it's not. You are just looking out for yourself. It's a very selfish game, and I'm just trying to do what's best for me and advance up the board. And you are not hurt when other people take over. Well, not necessarily, because your people on the board are never removed. They only retreat somewhere else. Once you put people out by advancing up the yellow column, they are going to stay on the board. So you will have those people available, and often they will be in multiple places around the globe, giving you different opportunities for where to move and where to take over a city and where to go as you're trying to complete cards or score the dice to advance up columns. You can actually use a retreat to your advantage sometimes, because you can retreat those forces anywhere where you already have someone. So you can put out someone, possibly spread out to another location, and then end up retreating and possibly get lots of people moving across the globe all at once, putting you in a location that is more advantageous for the dice or the cards. Now it's interesting because there's no randomness in the combat, but there's lots of random elements throughout everything else, because you don't know what's going to be your focus for any particular turn until that turn starts. You roll the dice, you've got re-rolls, maybe you discard a card to get a sword. You can discard a card as many times as you want for as many swords as you want. Sometimes we've seen people with 3 swords just clear out whole areas. So you can definitely use that to your advantage, but then you have swords and not colors. So if you have even more cards, you can change something to a sword, slice through people, and then change it to a color at the end of your turn. You're done with the sword, you put it aside, and now it's a purple, and now you advance on purple. So you get multiple use out of it by throwing away those cards. You get something. It's not the card points, but it's other points. So you just have to keep that in mind, the long-term goal of advancing as far as you can in whatever ways are open to you. So you're rewarded specifically for going out and attacking, but it's hard to plan in advance for what you're going to do. You might have a card that says occupy 2 islands, and you're like, okay, I have something I want to do, but if the dice don't come up to match the islands that you can reach or that are available to you, or there's not cities there to take over, it's only a couple of points. So maybe something else is better. It just depends on what you roll and what you're trying to do. And you can modify the rolling. You can choose what you want a bit. As you add more dice, of course, you have more options generally for what to focus on a particular turn. And that lets you shape your goals somewhat. There's a couple other interesting elements. So you're going to be putting cities on the board as you reach certain areas, but you are often not going to score the points for those cities. You're just putting out a target for someone else to take over. You can potentially just put lots of your forces in there and keep that city, but again, you're not rewarded for holding on to that territory unless you keep rolling that color again and again with the dice and advancing up the column. You want to spread out and roll lots of dice and then advance on lots of things at multiple times. You often get 4 or 5 dice by the end of the game, and if you could advance on 4 dice, that's sweet. You really want to do that as much as you can. So you're putting out those cities, and in a way that's making a target, incentivizing someone else to go there. And often you have this little tit for tat where I take your city and you take mine. Okay, we've exchanged points. We don't know how much those points are. Ideally, I would have kept mine and gotten yours, but all right, we do what we can. We had one game where a person waited till pretty much the end of the game. They were just below these regions and then advanced on these 3 all at once, put those cities out on the board. It was the last turn, and they got all those cities. Of course, they were not that high up on the columns. You'd probably score more if you were up here, but you do what you can, given on what's available to you. The game is fairly straightforward, but I have had one play where people got very bogged down in terms of trying to decide what to do, because you're going to roll 2 dice and you're going to look at this and say, well, I'm already in a green. I don't want to attack anything this time, and I'm going to roll this. You can do it very quickly, or you might have possibilities. Wait, I got a sword. Do I want to attack this time? Where can I attack? How much is my movement? Where can I move to? What's within reach? And almost everything is within reach once you up your movement just a little bit. And then you start thinking about possibilities for what you're going to do. And a couple of people have just bogged down completely, just frozen. And this is before they even re-rolled, because they were trying to see every possible thing they could do, figure out, well, what's that going to be? What's that going to get me? What's that going to get me? What's that going to get me? Because there's no randomness to that first roll. You rolled the dice, and now you can see what you have to work with. You know what your movement is. You know where everyone is. You know what card you have in your hand. Or do I want to re-roll? Let me figure it out. And then they re-roll, and then, oh, now I got to figure out again. What if I go here? What if I go here? What if I go here? And one game in particular took way longer than expected. The box says 30 to 60 minutes, and that was a 2-hour 5-player game, which is much longer than all of my other games. So it's possible to, I don't want to say overthink, but go so far in that you're coming out the other side again, that there's no particular advantage, because it's not necessarily clear, especially in a first game, what's the best thing to do? What's going to get you the most points? The only thing that sort of stands out, and that seems clear to everyone pretty much immediately, is that the reroll column is generally the worst, because you want to get more dice because that gives you more options. You want more movement because that lets you reach out more places. You want more cards just because those can potentially be points, or they let you get swords or dice or of the color that you wish. And you want more people because then you can stay in more places. I did see someone win where they went almost the entire game. It was a purple player. They went almost the entire game with 3 people. They did not advance this until I think it was the next to last round. And somehow, with only 3 people, they kept moving up the columns every single turn. They had those dice. They kept advancing pretty much 3 every time. 3, 3, 3. Would capture lots of cities. Were scoring cards. Everything just worked out magically. And then they finally got a few more people. And they won. So you don't have to get more people. You don't have to necessarily get more dice. You want it because you incidentally get more points at game's end. I'm pointing at the wrong thing. There's points. The columns are slightly different. Every player has one column that goes up very gradually. It's like 0, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 17. There you go. It's on that one. And right, max that out. That's huge. If you're not going to max it out though, often you're just like, I don't really care that much. Here it's the orange column, and then boom. Getting the 5 dice is already good, but getting here is like whatever. But can you make that last one? And so you've got these little incentives that pull you in particular directions along with the cards in your hand. But again, you're up to whatever the dice are, and then what the reroll is, and where you are, and where everyone else is. There's all these other chance elements coming into play, but you pretty much have a lot of freedom for where you're going and what you're trying to do. A lot of variety. I really enjoyed this. Vogel really did what he set out to do. He had a nice designer diary that I published on BGG News that laid out his goals for what he was trying to achieve with these slightly asymmetric civilizations living in this Uchronic history where the world is set up differently in terms of how the civilizations developed and where they were. It works out really well. And of course, you've got these big blobby areas where the world is divided up into much larger pieces. So you can hop around to many places quickly, where turtling does nothing. So it's really interesting to see. And again, there's a selfish element that really comes through the game, which kind of mimics what I feel was present in civilizations of old. And again, or not again, I'm not a student of history, so I don't have a lot of background for saying this, but the general sense I always got was in your civilization, in your culture, you were the awesome people and everyone else was just in your way. They did not belong. They should not be in our area. This is what we need. We need this area, and we're just going to go take over that area. And if there's someone else there, well, they better get out of our way, or they're going to suffer for it. And so this game mimics that gameplay style because, yes, it is all about you and what's important to you, and everyone else is just in your way, and you just want to clear them out. So it's very different from what feels like a modern perspective where I know that you in another country, of course, you have your own desires, your own goals, your own things you want to do, and we should not be going to take over your country because you've got your own things that you want to do. And sure, maybe things were different in the past, borders were in other locations, but you know what? Let's just go with what we have now and make the best of what we have. At least that's what I hope would be the approach. If you want to show those aggressive tendencies, well, maybe you could just stick to a game and express them that way. This one is a nice option should you choose to do that.